Hello, everybody, and welcome to Self-Publishing Insiders. I'm Jim Azevedo. I lead corporate communications and marketing at Draft Digital. And today, my guest, it's my honor and my privilege to welcome our guest, Julie Broad of Book Launchers. Hi, Julie.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. So, Julie, I was doing some research on you, and so Julie's a four-time author. One of those books hit the number one spot at Amazon. She's a four-time author, the founder of Book Launchers. But I was going through your background a bit, Julie, and I was reading your career history, your education, your background in sales and marketing, and I feel that, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like you had an idea that you wanted to be an entrepreneur or a business owner from a young age. Is that true? Or did you kind of fall into it? Like, tell me about your path.
Yeah, no, I mean, I grew up in a motel on the side of a highway in Canada. So my
Okay,
parents,
I didn't read about that
yeah,
part.
no, I know it's not. It is there. You'd have to have gone deep, but
Okay.
I've definitely talked about it. And so I grew up in fairly, I wouldn't necessarily call them entrepreneurial parents, but they were business owners.
Okay.
They always employed themselves and ran businesses. So it wasn't that crazy for me to envision myself running my own business. But the funny
Okay.
part is, I went to business school and I did an MBA in particular. I'm hoping that it would teach me how to start a business. And boy, was I disappointed. It taught me how to be a corporate drone,
Oh
basically.
yeah.
Here's the blue suit, here's the brown suit, and here's when to wear them. And it really, their job, at least at the MBA program I went to, was to create six-figure salaries out of their
Hmm.
graduates. And so, the only entrepreneurial class they had was basically how to raise venture capital for your startup, which wasn't what I was going for. So yes, I always
Yeah.
really wanted to have my own business, but I also, did do an MBA, and I did go down the corporate path for a period of time before I started
Yeah.
my own ventures.
Yeah. Sometimes going down that corporate path is an education in and of itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was fun. I learned a lot, and I met some great people. So I never regret. I mean, there's very few things that I've done that I regret, because everything kind of led to where I am today, and all those experiences
Yes.
build up so that, I'm able to do the things I can do today.
Okay. Well, can you tell us what led to Book Launchers, and then maybe give a little bit of background on what led to its founding and what Book
Yeah.
Launchers is and what it does for authors, nonfiction authors?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it goes back to my first book, More Than Cash Flow, and even before that, really. But my first book, I was rejected by traditional publishing
Hmm.
after they actually sought me out. So I didn't even pursue a book deal.
Really?
The acquisition editor at
Okay.
Wiley was introduced to me, and they were like, "Yeah, this is great." And I told them my book idea, and they were like, "No, that's too general," because I was a real estate investor and I had a real estate training and education company at that time.
Okay.
And so I told them my idea. They're like, "No, too general." They're like, "But we like you, so here's a book idea for you. Go
Nice.
go go build a proposal." So we built the proposal. I hired people to help, and 3 months later, send it in. I'm just waiting for the contract, and
Yeah.
then I get an email that says, "Yeah, we don't think the marketing department doesn't think you have a strong enough platform to sell books."
Oh my God. And this is after how much time went by?
3 months.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm going to
and
bring
this
up the book cover so people know what we're talking about. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course, that'd be great.
Okay.
So yeah, so they rejected me. They first
This one.
they sought, yes, that's the one. They sought me
Okay.
out, then they rejected me. They rejected my idea, then they rejected me. But what it did, it was such a gift, because about 6 months later, after my ego recovered, because the hardest part about that whole thing was I had friends that actually did get book deals with them, and so I was looking at them, going like, "What do they have that I don't? Like, why was I not worthy?"
It's like
Uh,
being invited to the prom and then ghosted.
right? It's exactly even worse. It's like, not even like,
And
you're
all my
not good
friends,
enough.
and all my friends are
Right.
there, like, where are you?
Yeah. No, they actually showed up and said, "You're not good enough for this date." So,
Oh,
it was one of those things where I recovered, and I went back to the original book idea that I had, because I had read, 65, 75 real estate books by that time, because I'd been investing in real estate for, 11 years at that juncture.
okay.
And I went, "No, there is a need for this book." And I thought, you know what? Fine. even if it only helps one person, I'm going to write this book. But you know what, Wiley, I'm going to do it better than if you'd given me that book deal. And so I went into everything I could find about self-publishing and marketing books. And there wasn't a lot because this was 2011, 2012 when I was working on the book. But I dove into whatever I could find. And I ended up self-publishing the book. And, because I was very motivated.
I would say they put a little bit of kerosene on that fire of yours.
A little, yeah. It's dangerous to tell me that you can't do something and to, tell me my friends are better than me. So I was going after it. And so I took that book with a whole bunch of support because I rallied a lot of support all across Canada because I was in Canada at the time, from friends and colleagues in the real estate space. And it went to #1 in print books on Amazon. It sat in the top 100 print books for almost 200 days. Still to this day, it still sometimes outsells my other books, like my Self-Promote and Succeed and Self-Publish and Succeed, which is a little frustrating, but also kind of cool that it still has momentum, after I've left real estate like a long time ago.
So why did this book hit? Why do you think that it really took off?
I think there's, 3 things that really worked for this book. The one thing is that it
pay attention, everybody. This is gold.
Here's your 3 tips. It ran counter to a lot of commonly held beliefs in real estate. So it wasn't just another, here's how to get rich in real estate, and I'll just give one example. I don't need to teach all the concepts that were in the book, but one of the examples is that real estate investing is passive income. And, I experienced firsthand that it wasn't. And I had stories like a property manager robbing rent money from me that, really illustrated that if you think it's passive, you can get ripped off and people can steal from you very easily. And so, I was like, more properties isn't better. A lot of people think you're doing better if you have 100 properties. And so I had stories that ran counter to that. So that's one big thing. The other thing is that my audience was very specific and clear. It was for people who were new to real estate or they'd bought a couple properties and it wasn't going well. And the third thing is that I rallied the support, not just of people who were, fit my reader category, but they were buyers of the book, not necessarily readers. So I had mortgage brokers and realtors and people who ran real estate investing events all across Canada promoting my book. And, and I think a lot of people don't think about the difference between a buyer and a reader. Because that buyer is not always the one that's going to read your book, but they can actually be the one that buys hundreds or thousands of copies of your book to give to the people in their audience because it hits on a topic that they want their audience to understand, which, in my case, mortgage brokers really wanted people to understand not just investing, but practical investing, not the get rich quick stuff that makes their life a nightmare. So those are the 3 reasons why I think the book still to this day still sells.
Wow. Did you know when you first wrote the book that you were going to approach some of the buyer audience, or were you always thinking about the individual readers in the beginning? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah. I didn't think about it in the manner that I'm explaining it right now, but yes, I always looked at who do I know that has my person in their audience that I can connect with to help me get, because I only had a newsletter list of about 10,000 at the time. And I had yes, only, but you're not going to get to #1 on Amazon with 10,000 subscribers on a newsletter. You need hundreds of thousands. So, I didn't have that at the time. But I had some relationships with some really, great people across Canada that did have audiences too.
Okay. So that's excellent advice and really eye-opening to me as well. So the book started doing well. And then it's the success of this first book that started getting you to, I guess, some author friends and others were coming to you for advice.
Yeah. So in my real estate training and education company, I was coaching investors. Some of them had hired companies to do these books for them. And, they were terrible books, it just broke my heart because I'm a book lover at heart. And to see how terrible the books were, they're like, oh, it's just a business card. But, nothing makes me want to cry more than hearing somebody call a book just a business card. I love books way too much. And they were terrible. And then they were wondering why they weren't selling and why it wasn't growing their business and their brand. And it was bit by bit, but it was really kind of one of those moments where my husband was losing interest in our real estate investing. And I didn't want to do our investing in the education company without him because he was the financing piece of the puzzle, which, isn't the whole thing, but it's an important thing.
Absolutely.
And so I was looking at, well, what else can we do? And we were looking at moving to the States. And so but basically I looked at buying a business to move. The short answer is that, Book Launchers was my visa. Because I looked at buying a business and I just thought, I'm buying somebody else's problems. I'll just create my own problems. I'll start my own business.
Yeah.
And I dreamed up the company I wished I could have hired for my, as an author. And that's Book Launchers.
And that's Book Launchers. Okay. So did the company come before the YouTube channel, or did you I was talking to you backstage a little bit, and you mentioned that you started putting some short videos together for friends who had questions, or for other authors who had questions. Did the Book Launchers, the company, come first, or did the videos kind of come first? And then did you feel like, oh, I think I've got something here? And how did it work?
So when the first book, when More Than Cashflow went to #1, a lot of people were like, how did you do it? Like, explain this. And I had two businesses. I was running an investment business where we were buying properties and renting them out. And then I was running this training and education business. So I didn't have time to teach people the book stuff. So I just shot 5 videos, put them on YouTube, and would send them the playlist and be like, here's it all there. And they did those videos still to this day. If you dig deep, you'll find these old videos.
I'm going to put up the link too.
Yeah, there you go. And, so that was interesting, and they definitely did well, but that wasn't really the reason I started Book Launchers. And then Book Launchers and the booklaunchers.tv, the YouTube channel that you have up there, that came after I launched. That was kind of separate, but I kept the channel. So I was like, these videos are there and they're the same topic, so we'll just keep rolling.
So Julie's really very humble, because she hadn't mentioned that you got like about 57,000 subscribers, 58,000 subscribers. You've produced close to 800 videos now that have millions of views. And everybody, don't leave right now, but after this video, go to Julie's channel and subscribe to it. And I guarantee you, like, every single one of her videos is just like, there's no fluff. It's just bang, 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 point after point after point. Great pieces of advice, super concise, super easy to follow. Book Launchers is geared toward nonfiction authors, but there are gems and evergreen best practices for authors of every genre, I would say, in your content. So
thanks, Jim. Yeah, we have lots of fiction people who are constantly joining in and telling me what applies, but it is all specific to nonfiction and really growing a brand and growing a business from a nonfiction book.
Okay. While I'm on the topic now, let's dig a little bit further into Book Launchers. How does it work? If an author wants to work with you, if they have an upcoming project coming up, what's the best way for them to engage?
Yeah, I mean, we're set up a little differently in that we are, full service self-publishing. So you're not going to come and just hire us for just editing. And the reason we do it that way is because of this marketing piece. Really, my belief is that part of the reason More Than Cashflow did well and our authors do well is because we're not just helping them create a great book. We're looking at, okay, how do we position this book so that it's going to sell and appeal to that ideal reader at the end? So we're integrated. We're not just going to edit your book, because at the same time, we're going to look at your keywords, your category, and go, okay, how does this book hook and position for that category so that it's going to appeal to your ideal reader? So we're set up that way. So it's really hard to come in and just say, I just want a cover, because we're not going to just do a cover. But yeah, so we're set up as a monthly membership. So as long as you're a member, we keep working on your book. Everything belongs to you. Everything's set up in your name. So it's really clean, really transparent. We also have courses. So, a couple times a year, you can run through our course on writing, or you could run through our course on how to market a book, which is essentially how to use your book to pitch it to other people's audiences, to get in front of other people's audiences. So those are the main ways you can work with us. And it's not set up so that, again, it's individual, but also you can work with us for as long as you want, because at the end of it, we're going to market your book with you. So we'll run Amazon ads, we'll pitch you for podcasts, live appearances, we submit you to book awards and do bookstore and library outreach. So we're really surrounding you with our arms and helping you as much as we can.
That sounds pretty unique. I don't think I know of too many companies, or any other companies, that kind of have a subscription-based model where you can do it month by month by month. It seems like it's more of, well, and you don't call yourselves a hybrid publishing model either, which is refreshing. But there are other companies out there that says, yeah, we'll help you get published. We've got editors and book cover designers on staff. We've got a marketing team on staff. And just so that you know, it's going to cost you, let's say 7,500 to 10,000 up front. And then we'll work with we'll decide if we want to work with you, if we feel like your project's good enough. But I like your model. That's interesting. And people don't have to, if after a month or two, they think, well, it's not really for me, or maybe I didn't budget for this properly, or they say, this is fantastic. I want to book time with you 6 months before my launch. They can keep that going.
Yeah, we have lots of authors who've worked on book 2 and book 3 with us too. So some people come in and they never leave, which is fantastic because we can build these long-term relationships
you don't usher them
with
out.
people.
Yeah.
No, I mean the odd person, but if I'm being honest, but most people, we're happy to work with them for the long term.
Okay, I just had another question and it went poof. What was it, Jim? Come on. Nah, forget it. I'm gonna let it go. I'm gonna let that one go. Let's talk about your other books too. So More Than Cash Flow, you kind of hit it out of the park with that first one, and then your second book came along, and you've got this track record now. And your second book is The New Brand You, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. And you even said the title right, which is unusual because most people call it The Brand New You, which is a story unto itself. But yeah, go on.
I'm a professional, Julie. I've been practicing. No, actually, I watched your other YouTube videos, so I have a little bit of background in this one. But what happened with The New Brand You?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't just one thing. So first of all,
what's the book about in the first place? Sorry.
Yeah, so the book is about really how to attract sales to you without cold outreach. And the background of why I wrote it and kind of my whole experience was that building a brand with my previous business, I had a YouTube channel in that business too. And I did speaking and, my book, but also, it's set up so that people came to me. So whether it was in my training and education company to join my mastermind, or whether it was raising capital for our real estate, people came to us so that we were able to decide if we wanted to work with them, not the other way around, like not us begging people to work with us. So that was really the whole formula for what had worked. The challenges are many. But there's two core challenges, I think, with this book. One is that I tried to use it to bridge the gap from being real estate and being something else. And the challenge is that I didn't know exactly where I was going to go with my business. And again, this is where I was telling you that my husband was kind of, he was getting into acting and he wasn't, interested in being full-time in these real estate endeavors anymore. And I didn't want to do them myself or replace him. So we were both kind of transitioning. So I wrote this book, and had I written it as basically how to raise money for your real estate deals, I think it would have done phenomenal. But I wrote it and kind of went generic with it because I didn't want to be all about real estate anymore.
Yeah.
So the audience wasn't clear and the positioning wasn't clear, even though I think it's one of my best books. I do. And I've heard that from other people who've read all 4 books. They just think the content and the stories in it and how it's written is really useful and applicable, but it wasn't well positioned. The second problem, I didn't know this, obviously, or I wouldn't have done it, but the title is a big problem. And I knew this, my whole marketing plan ended up being podcast interviews versus, and I did a few speaking engagements, but I didn't end up marketing the book that much because it launched. I was pregnant and I was moving to the States to launch Book Launchers when it all launched. So, life is busy happening when you're making other plans, whatever that saying is. And so, but it was about 10 podcasts in where more than half of them had called it The Brand New You. I was like, oh crap, I got a title problem.
Which instantly says self-help.
Yeah. And the problem was if you typed The Brand New You into Amazon at the time, Dory Clark, who is somebody who is well known for branding, her book came up. So you're immediately going to see her book with like 600 positive reviews, and you're more than likely buying her book and forgetting about me. And so that was a big issue for that book. And for whatever reason, nobody ever got the title right. Like it was more than half. And they'd be literally putting it on screen like you just did and reading it wrong or holding it in their hand and reading it wrong. And I tested the title and I worked with, some really smart marketing people on the title, but we never thought to tell people, hey, here's the title, and see if they could tell me the title back a couple minutes later. Because if I'd done that, I'm certain I would have discovered there was a title problem.
Yeah, we're used to saying brand new, brand new, brand new to describe things. The new brand is just like, oh, wait a second, I have to stop for a minute and think about that.
Yeah.
So I thought the point that you made about having a specific audience and a specific problem to describe, and that because you generalized it a bit. Maybe for a newer author, you would think, well, yeah, I mean, this book it can apply to several different audiences and several different industries. Why can't I put forth a more generic feel? And it sounds like you discovered, that doesn't work. You have to get that niche target audience like you did for your first book. And that's what helped that book pop.
Yeah, a lot of people think that. They're like, my book is for everyone, or I don't want to get too specific. But, actually, I get really excited when somebody has a really specific niche, because how do you find everyone in marketing versus if you know the exact niche? And one of my favorite examples of this, we had a book a couple of years ago called Tactical Lockpicking, and it was for first responders to get through locked obstacles during emergencies. I mean, your market isn't gigantic. It is people like, anybody in the fire training, in, first responder kind of training. They're going to be the people who want this book. But boy, when we were pitching podcasts and live appearances and speaking for this author, I think in the first month, we had 75% of the pitches come back and say, yes, absolutely, we want this author.
75%.
Yeah. And our normal is like 10 to 30%. Right. So that just tells you how you go niche, and it's something you solve a problem for somebody that they have in that niche. They're going to be like, oh my gosh, I've been waiting all my life for this and I didn't even know it. And that's the kind of response you get. And you can expand out from there. The thing is, when you're trying to market to everybody, it's really hard to stand out. But when you have a niche, you at least have momentum. You have somewhere to start. You have a lot of people going, oh my gosh, this book was amazing. Because then what happened is we had a crime writers conference contact us and say, we want him to come speak so that we can make sure that our writers are writing accurately about how to get through, how to pick locks and things like that. So you're not stuck in that niche, but you have somewhere to start, and you can get momentum, and you can get sales, and you can get some money, which can help you reach a larger audience afterwards.
That is such good advice. And it's totally counterintuitive, because as an author, you think, well, this is my first book, or maybe it's my second, or maybe even my 12th book, and I have to expand my audience. I need to reach as many authors as I possibly can. You can't tell me to limit my reach, Julie, because then I'm going to be a failure. It's never going to work.
That's right. I always tell people, I'm like, oh, I said, your audience is everyone. They're like, yes. I'm like, so you have the budget of Coca-Cola. Yeah. And even Coca-Cola doesn't market to everyone. Like realistically, you look at Coca-Cola and they've also got, it's a bigger niche, but they still have a niche, because there's no point in spending a dime on Coca-Cola advertising to me, because I'm never going to drink it. And they don't. I never see Coke ads.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And as you said, you can always expand that audience later as you start to grow. Now, did you have plans? I'm going to bring the book back up again. Here it is. Now, I don't know if I read it on your website or if I watched it on your YouTube channel, but you're planning to kind of revisit this book in 2025. Did I get that right?
Yeah, you've been watching some videos, because I think I've only mentioned that a few times. So good for you. Okay. Yeah, I do think I can rework this book, because the content again is fantastic. But I'm going to rework it for author branding, because a lot of what's there. Okay. Yeah, there you go.
This is what we're talking about.
Exactly. So a lot of what is in that book, I can repurpose it and create a new book on author branding, which is really important for all authors, but in particular, nonfiction authors that are building their brand and their business around their book.
That's a really, really extremely important point that I want everybody here watching and listening to on the podcast to understand, is that if you publish a book and put it out into the world and it doesn't take off maybe as you had expected it to, Julie, or maybe tanked and you're just like, oh my God, I'm a failure. It doesn't work. As an indie author, one of your biggest advantages over traditionally published authors is that you retain 100% creative control. So even if that book that you put out into the world doesn't take off in 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever the case is, it's never game over, right?
No. And I love,
Yeah.
and I mean, that's the beautiful thing. And there might have even been potentially a different country where the book might have done well, and you
Mm-hmm.
could have sold the foreign rights, versus if you have a traditional publisher, they would have just binned your book and forgot it because it wasn't selling, and they wouldn't have done another print run or anything. They would have you would have been dead to them.
Right. And if it had been picked up by a traditional publisher, they're not going to come back to you 5 years later and say, you know what, that book really didn't perform very well. Tell you what, let us take it back from you. We'll put it out there again. Let's see how we can help you. They're never going to do that. But as the author, you get to decide what you want to do with that book. If you want to revise it, you get to decide when your manuscript graduates to become a published book. You get to decide what the price of that book is going to be, where you want your distribution channels to be. You get final say in your cover art, all of it.
And that's the other thing is if things were different for me back then, because I
Mm-hmm.
knew within 3 months of this book coming out that it was not working, right? Like I said, the podcast interviews I was doing, I got invited to a few speaking engagements based on one of the chapters, but that was it. I knew this book was not working. If I wasn't already preoccupied with moving to the States and launching book launchers, I would have just, pivoted and gone, okay, let's give this a new title, put a new cover on it, adjust some of the contents and do it again, because I had the material. And again, the content was great. So I think that's the other thing is when you can see something clearly isn't working,
Yeah.
that's not the end, right? To me, that's a starting point of, okay, now I've got some information. I can take
Mm-hmm.
this information and, do better the next time.
Okay. That makes perfect sense. Can we talk about when you start working with an author, do you typically work with them, I'm assuming, like way before they publish their books? But you had mentioned when we first started a conversation, way before we had this even scheduled, I think, you mentioned setting your books up for success before you even put pen to paper. How can an
Mhm.
author set themselves up for success before they even begin writing their book?
Yeah, yeah. It's one of my favorite topics. And again, we've kind of talked about it without directly talking about it, which is really getting
Yeah.
clear on who your audience is and why this book is going to have an impact in their life. And I call this the outcome of the outcome. And that is not just knowing, because I hear this all the time, my book's going to be
Mm-hmm.
inspirational, my book's going to give someone hope. Well, unless you're famous, that's not enough. And even if you're famous these days with so many books out there, I think you've got to go a little further. And so it's what kind of hope for what for that specific person. And so the kind of crazy weird example that I give because it's memorable is,
Yeah.
let's say you have a book about how to get your hair to grow back. And
Yeah.
so
I could
so
use
the
that book.
yeah, there you go. The outcome of this book, though, that's the first outcome. That's not actually what you're selling. What you're selling is whatever your ideal reader thinks is going to be the result of that. So, for
Mm,
example, I have a close friend who, was single, and he felt like his dating prospects weren't at the caliber that he wanted because he didn't have hair. So he went and he got his hair, he got hair put in, so that he could have better dates. So the outcome of the outcome for this particular person isn't that you're going to have hair. It's that you are going to attract the people you want to date because
yeah.
you have hair. And
See,
so
what's this going
that's
to do for you? Yeah.
exactly. And a
Got
lot
it.
of people are trying to sell the hair regrowth. And when they write their book, one of two things has happened. They're trying to write the book about the hair regrowth, or in some cases, even worse, is they've been told by all their friends and family they should write a book because their story is so amazing. And they write the book and they don't even think about who they're writing it for and what the outcome is. They just write their story and think because their story is amazing, people want it. But
Mm,
again, it has to have that clear reader, and it has to have an outcome of the outcome. Even if you're writing a memoir, there has to be something. So your story is going to offer inspiration that your immigration journey can have a happy
yeah.
ending, or like whatever it is, it's that outcome of the outcome. And that's before you start writing, or if you've already started writing, it's not too late. once you've published it, it can be very difficult to reposition a book. So positioning it early as possible to have that outcome of the outcome. So you have that marketable hook and that audience that you know what they're looking for and where you're going to find them. That's everything when it comes to book marketing.
So know where that goal is, know where you're going to take those readers. Okay.
Yeah.
I love it. Is that a misconception for some authors that they can just kind of just start writing the book and they'll get there when they get there and they'll just kind of figure it out on the way? What are some misconceptions that you've got to constantly kind of guide your authors through and coach them through?
Yeah, that's one of them. and there are people who will write a book and kind of figure it out as they go. And that's okay as long as they are thinking about, okay, who's my reader? Do I know who they are? Is the reader going to care about this? As long as they're actually thinking about the reader along the way, it's okay if you're figuring it out as you go. Because sometimes we got to clear through, you kind of have to write some words just to find out what you're actually writing about.
So true.
Nothing wrong. Yeah. But one of the misconceptions is you put it on Amazon, it's going to sell. And I'm still stunned to this day that people still think that. I mean, 7 years ago when I launched Book Launchers, I think there was still some elements of put it on Amazon and it will sell.
Oh my God. Yeah. I remember the early days of self-publishing, back in the Smashwords days, even in like in 2010, 2011, still. Yeah. All I got to do is put it up there.
Yeah. Yeah. And so people still think that, and it's it's so far from the truth. You have to have a plan and a strategy. And if it stops selling, especially on Amazon, but other platforms too, you have to have a strategy to get people to go and pay attention to it again and kind of reignite interest in it. But the other, I don't know if it's a misconception, but the other thing I run into all the time is people either think they can self-edit a book, or their aunt who has an eagle eye for typos is going to be a good editor for your book. Nobody, even a professional writer, is able to edit their own work. Our brains play tricks on us and we don't see the opportunities to make it better. Forget about typos, right? I think editing
get a little bit too close to our projects.
Yes. And editing isn't just about typos. I think that's, the other thing is a lot of people they've paid for editors and they go, my book's ready. And you read it and you're like, oh, like it's grammatically correct, but it's not good. And it's because they skipped, that developmental or that content edit, which would have gone through and made it actually a really good read. They just got the editor that made it grammatically correct. And it's just not the same thing.
Oh, right. Yeah. I've had conversations like that. I'm sure all of my colleagues, or anybody who is a service provider or an author who has gone to a conference in the past has probably run into at least one person who says, oh, I could self-edit. I've self-edited all the time. I'm an editor. One person I ran into at a conference was explaining to me that he's an English professor. He doesn't need to hire an editor, and he'll never hire an editor because he can do it himself. And I could not get through to him, but that's okay. He'll learn.
The reviewers will let him know.
Yes. Well, if that's true, that is so true. Do you ever run into authors who, as a misconception, say, well, I can't afford to self-publish. I heard it's so expensive to self-publish? Because that's a misconception that we run into all the time, especially authors who have been duped by vanity presses in the past.
Yeah. And I think I do run into that, but I also run into the other side of it, which is they think they're going to self-publish for free and they're not going to invest in things like editors and covers. And so you can, like, that's the beautiful thing that, of today's time is you can just get a Word document and put it on and sell it, or at least put it on a platform where it could be sold. But, the other side of that is I do think you need to come into it and think of it as a business and think of it as something that you're going to have some expenses and investments on, and that you are planning to get some sort of a return on the other side. Because I think if I was to say anything, I would say that that's one thing is a lot of people are writing books and they consider it a hobby. And, the IRS doesn't think it's a hobby. The IRS is going to happily tax you on everything that you're making. So you shouldn't think of it as a hobby either. If the IRS is going to take money, then you should take advantage of the write-offs and treat it like a business.
Oh, come on. We're all still kind of hungover from tax season.
Well, maybe you got a tax refund because you wrote some of your expenses off.
Very good. So let's talk about that a little bit. Not taxes, but building a
Thankfully.
business. Yes. So how do you counsel your authors to build a business around their book? And as a follow up, do you counsel them to build a business around a book, or do you counsel them to build a business around their author brand? How does that work? And I know
Yeah,
that's a whole other podcast in and of itself, I'm
I
sure.
was just going to say we almost have to come back and dive into that topic, but I
Yeah.
think that the simple answer is that some authors have a business and they're writing the book for the business. Like, my books, Self-Publish and Succeed and Self-Promote and Succeed, book 3 and book 4.
Mm-hmm.
They those books are written for book launchers. So the book launchers existed, and I wrote those books to add on to help people, to attract people to understand our process. We use them for so many purposes: onboarding, lead generation, just helping people.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's the other point where you might write a book and then build the business around the book.
Yeah.
And in all cases, I would say you're creating a brand. So whether you have your business or you're going to grow a business, you're still building a brand, and you should be building a platform, because any of these, even all the platforms that Draft to Digital distributes through, none of them are going to tell the author who bought their book. So they don't get the email information or the contact information. So it's up to
important.
you.
Yep.
Yeah, it is. And it's so important. So it's up to you as an author to create reasons for the reader to come to you and engage with you, so that you build your own platform, so that whatever you're doing on the other side, whether it's just other books or it's speaking or it's consulting or courses,
Mm-hmm.
merch, whatever it is, you're building that audience. So there's people that will be there to support you and fund those things. And I think that's kind of the simplest part of what we focus on, is build your platform so that you're getting contact information and building relationships so that you can do all the other things that you may want to do as an author.
When should authors begin building their platforms? Just as a
Yesterday.
general rule. Yep.
So if you didn't start yesterday, then that means today. It's the most fundamental. And an example I can give, from my own life,
Yeah.
is I launched book launchers. It's complete pivot, right? I was real estate investing, and I was able to launch book launchers and have 10 clients on day one, because I had a platform over here of people who trusted me. So even though it was very different, right? I'm going from real estate investing over to, helping people self-publish a book. When I sent an email to my newsletter list and said, hey, this is going to be my new business. If you're interested in writing a book and you want to be a beta client, here's your chance. And I got 10 clients, from that, to then beta test what we were going to do at book launchers. If I didn't have a platform, if I didn't have that email list, how can I launch this new business?
Right. That's huge. And that's what all of our best-selling authors tell us. That's with my new book, I'd sell a heck of a lot more books if readers who previously purchased my books knew that my next book was coming up, because not every book that you sell, those readers aren't necessarily going to seek you out and try to find your social media pages or your website. Some of them will, but a lot of them won't. Those customers don't become your customers automatically. They become the customers of Amazon or Apple Books or wherever it is that they bought that book. And you don't have a way to contact those authors. So build that platform, build that email newsletter list, everybody.
Yeah. And I'll just add one piece on that, which is a lot of people think that the website you put on the back of the book, or you put on the very last page of the book, that's going to do the trick, but it's not. So put it in the middle, put it on page 2, have a reason for them to go to that page, be like, hey, come check out all the pictures from my travels, or come download this checklist that I've created for you, and get them over to those places, and do it early, and do it a few times, because some people are not going to read every page of your book.
Yep, that's fantastic advice. Julie, I wanted to ask you another question too. How do you look at failure, or not necessarily failure, but how do you advise your clients when, let's say, they've launched a book in the past and maybe that book hasn't taken off as they had expected? How do you counsel them through that so that their next project, so that they have the energy to go on with their next project? And we've talked about this a little bit with your second book, but how do you coach them through that feeling of, oh my gosh, I blew it, it's over?
Yeah, for me, what I always look at is, what's the lesson we can take away from that, so that I don't
of
ever
it.
really look at things like failure, because I think if you learn from it, it was just an education.
Hmm.
So, I don't really, even though, and now I wanted to call it the brand new you myself because we've been talking about it, but the new brand you, it didn't do well. It certainly didn't pay for itself, even after almost, 8 years or whenever it's been now.
Yeah.
But to me, it was an education, and I've been able to make so much from that book because I've been able to use it in my videos and talk about, hey, this is why your title is so important. Like, I know you think your title is fantastic and you're madly in love with it, but is it really a great title? And let's check it. And here's why.
Yeah.
And so I can take these stories, come I wanted, but I'm
Hmm.
able to use them. And so that's how I always tell my own stories. I never tell somebody, hey, like, rah, 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 you're going to be great. I always just kind of say, hey, well, here's what's happened to me. And here's my perspective.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people go, oh yeah, you're right. When I did that book, here's what I made a mistake on, and here's what I will do differently next time. And so they're able to quickly see how that was actually just the motivation or the education they needed to do this better and to create more success because they've had that experience.
Yep. So important to realize that it's not game over. And you're brave and humble once again for, sharing that vulnerability and saying, hey, look, I did this. It didn't work. I learned from it. Look at my other books. Look at how they've done. And speaking of your other books, let's talk about a couple more of those. Do you mind? Let's
Oh,
see.
absolutely not. Yeah.
So is this book number 3, right? Is Self-Publish and
Yep.
Succeed? Tell us
Mhm.
about it. The No Boring Books Way to Write a Nonfiction Book That Sells.
Yes, I wrote this book to help authors really, do what we've talked about today, which is think about how you're going to sell the book before you start writing it, but then also to understand all the steps to creating a book that is as good or better than a traditionally published book. Because again, if somebody wasn't here at the beginning, I was talking about how I love books to my heart, and it breaks my heart when
Mm-hmm.
somebody says, "Oh, it's just a business card book. I don't care if it's any good."
Yeah.
That breaks my heart. I want
Yeah.
books to be fantastic, and I don't want anybody to ever pick up my book and go, "Oh, you self-published." Like, I just want them to look at my book and go, "This book's going to help me," and they don't even think about how it was published or how it came to the world. They're just excited to learn from it, and
Mm-hmm.
that's really what that book teaches is, how to position your book so that it's going to appeal to the reader, how you're going to be able to produce a really great book and the people you need to find to support you to create that book, and how to set it up to sell.
Why do you feel like self-published authors have to create books today that are just as good, if not better, than books that are coming out of traditional houses?
I mean, I don't think you have to. I see some authors that, have books that, that are a quality that I wouldn't want to have my name on. But generally
Yep.
speaking, if you're growing a business or building some sort of a brand around it, you want to be seen as somebody that cares about the output and what you put into the world. And some authors really want to get speaking engagements or consulting, or they want to be on bookstore shelves, virtual or otherwise. And for that to happen, you have to, and libraries in particular, my goodness, librarians will poo-poo you out of there so fast if they think you didn't have have the quality behind them as a traditional
Yeah.
published author. So yeah, so if you want those things, then it's really up to you to create something that is as good or better than a traditionally published book.
Yeah. I have so many authors who approach me and say, well, how am I going to get my book to stand out in a crowd or in a sea or in a tsunami of low quality self-published books that are flooding the market? And I always answer the same way, Julie. I tell them that your greatest challenge isn't standing out among a sea of low quality books. Your greatest challenge is standing out in a sea of high quality, low cost self-published books, because your fellow indie authors out there have really, really upped their game. Like, and
Yep.
they're already they know how to do it now. They're professionally savvy. They are already creating books that are just as good and often better than books that are
Yep.
coming out of traditional publishing houses.
And making way more money doing it. Like, that's the beautiful part, is that, people who are afraid to kind of invest in it, will I get a return? Well, if you produce a low quality book, the chances of a return aren't that great. But if you get good at this and you understand the marketing side of it, there's indie authors that will never ever take a traditional book deal, because they're looking at this going, what do you got that I don't, and I can make way more money doing this on my own. So
Yeah, right. Absolutely. That's one of your key advantages of being a self-published author. You have that pricing control. as well,
Yeah.
and you'll earn higher royalties to boot.
Yeah.
So we've got about a minute left. I want to remind folks that if you have a question, now's the time to ask Julie. There's a lot of comments in the comments section, not a ton of questions. That's because Julie is so good at putting this expert advice out there. Julie, let's talk about your last book. Let me bring it up for everybody real quick here. This is Self-Promote and Succeed. Again, the no boring books way to build your brand, attract your audience, and market your nonfiction book.
Yep. So this book is really all of the things that we do to help clients get their book into readers' hands and build their brand, and really position them in the marketplace to get the books out. And the challenge is a lot of people again think one thing is going to be the thing that sells their book. And my message is always like, you got to try a bunch, and then if you find something that's working, double down, do more of that. And for me that YouTube has been that for me and for our business. So that's why you see so many videos. Plus I love doing them. So the combination helps. Yeah. But I'm happy to give. So I've set that book up in audio. I did the audiobook for it and I've put it in BookFunnel, and I'm happy to give it to people if they want help to sell more books. And so you can get it at selfpromoteandsucceed.com/audio. So anybody can grab a copy of it in audiobook format.
That's amazing. Can you mention that website once again?
I was gonna type it in here, but it won't let me type. So it's
let me try.
selfpromoteandsucceed.com /
I'm under pressure audio. And I can't type. Selfpromoteandsucceed.com.
Yeah, I can put it in our private chat. I just can't seem to publicly selfpromoteandsucceed.com and then / audio.
Oh man. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you can go there too, and then you can buy it. I mean, that'll send people to buy it, but I was giving it to you.
So as we have a minute left here, I wanted to ask you the no boring books mantra. Where does that come from? What does it mean? No boring books.
It originally, one of my YouTube, I call them my YouTube besties, gave this to me years and years ago. But it's because my belief is that just because you're writing nonfiction and it's true and it's factual and it's educational, doesn't mean you shouldn't make it a book people want to read, because I feel like your book is not going to get read from start to finish. So it won't grow your brand, grow your business. People won't tell other people about it if it's not something that people are enjoying the read and really can't wait to pick up. So, that's our whole philosophy is no boring books. It might be true, it might be technical, but let's not make it boring, because we want people to get from the start to the finish. So then they tell other people about your fantastic book.
Love it. Love it. I'm going to do a quick check on the comments, make sure I didn't.
Oh, Dale just shut up.
Dude, come on, man.
Better late than never, my friend. Better late than never.
Thanks for joining, buddy. We appreciate you. Well, hi, Dale. He's got fans out there. We're coming to an end here. As he should, for sure. We're coming to an end, everybody. I just, I want to thank Julie again for just spending the time. I know you're a very, very busy person. So thank you for gracing us here today. We really, really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
Of course. Hope that you'll come back and see us again. For our viewers, I want to thank you guys too for coming here week in and week out. If you could do us a favor and like, share, comment, and subscribe to this channel, we really appreciate it, because we get folks like Julie to come on the show, talk about their books, and give us key pieces of wisdom and advice as well. And if you would, why not bookmark d2dlive.com so you can see what the next week's show will be all about and who the guest will be. And then finally, for those of you who may be aspiring authors, why not sign up for your free D2D account simply by going to draft2digital.com. I want to thank everybody again for joining us this week. Julie, if you wouldn't mind hanging out backstage in the green room for a second, we're going to play just a quick 30-second commercial spot for D2D print. But for everybody else, thanks again for joining us today. We'll see you all here again next week.
Ebooks are great, but there's just something about having your words in print. Something you can hold in your hands, put on a shelf, sign for a reader. That's why we created D2D Print, a print-on-demand service that was built for you. We have free, beautiful templates to give your book a pro look, and we can even convert your ebook cover into a full wraparound cover for print. So many options for you and your books. And you can get started right now at draftedigital.com.